Hello, everyone. We'll be starting the session in a short while. We have our speakers available now. You can see all our faces. I hope you are all staying safe and enjoying your evening or morning wherever you are. And I think the time has started. So I think it's good that we start the session now in the interest of time. So I'll start, so hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. I'm Ankit Singh. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO of Parallel Dots. I'll give a quick introduction of Parallel Dots. So Parallel Dots is one of the leading providers of image recognition solutions, helping consumer good companies improve their in-store execution. How we do that, I'll briefly touch upon it at the end of the session. But coming back to today's topic, so today we'll be discussing about improving the odds of your new product launches using image recognition. We all know how time sensitive it can be when you're launching a new product. So we'll be discussing all the challenges about that. Before we start that, just some housekeeping stuff. Feel free to ask any questions. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom control panel. You can type in your questions. We have also received some questions from the registration, from the attendees in the registration form. I will be taking up some of those questions as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Without further ado, I'll let Max, our CEO for Southeast Asia business, start the session. Over to you, Max.
Thanks, Ankit, for that. And hello, everyone. Quick word about myself. I'm Max. I have 30 plus years of experience with Unilever in FMCG industry, spanning Arabia and Southeast Asia. I did stints in sales, marketing, and general management with Unilever. Subsequently, I became a freelance consultant consulting in FMCG industry in Southeast Asia for energy drinks, beverages, and snacks businesses. And in terms of the webinar today, it'll be in two segments. The first segment of the webinar will be a recorded session. And you may wonder, why are we doing a recorded session? It's the reality of the COVID-19 days. And our speakers are from different time zones. So we have Australia on one extreme, and we have Holland on the other extreme, and few time zones in between. And so we pre-recorded the majority of the speeches, but our panelists are very kindly agreed to be present and answer any Q&A that comes up from you. So without, again, further waste of time, I pass you back to Ankit.
Sure, Max.
Here on the webinar with May Kwa. May, as you might have read, is a senior professional in marketing, spanning over 20 years of experience in FMCG and pharmaceutical industries, worked across a number of geographies, including the last position being Senior Vice President of Marketing in Unilever. Currently, she's a consultant working in leadership and organizational development based out of Singapore. Welcome, May.
Thank you, Max.
May, could you share with us, why is it necessary for companies to have new product launches?
So, Max, I worked for many years in FMCG. The truth is that, not just the goods are moving fast. In fact, consumers are moving very fast with their needs and their wants. And so it's very important to stay relevant to them. If not, you lose them. Secondly, I think competitions also move very fast. Yeah, and you don't want to be playing a catch-up game with your competitions. You want to be leading the game. And therefore, it's so important for us to keep on renovating, innovating, so that we stay relevant to consumers, so that we can continue to be their brand of choice, and we give them a portfolio of products that they can choose from. So that's why new product launches is very, very important in categories that I've worked with. And I think in many industry, innovations is key.
Now, may I ask a little bit further in terms of the new product experience, new product launch experience? Obviously, it's like a precision watch industry where there are many wheels turning at the same time, and it's important for all the wheels to align perfectly. And there are elements, many elements that make it happen, make it a success. It's not just one element, but it's all coming together. So can you take us through the process and also explain how the final delivery of the success would depend on what it would depend on?
Okay. So in the many years I work in Unilever, we have a very detailed process of innovations. The reason being that, innovations are very expensive. Yeah. It's not, something that you can easily put together and it will succeed. We know that 1 out of maybe 10 innovations in the marketplace succeed. Yeah. So the process itself is expensive, and the chances of success is also small. That's why it makes it such an expensive process to come up with good innovations. And as you know, in marketing, we always talk about the 6 Ps. You will find that a lot of the Ps are somewhat within the marketing control, but some Ps are just beyond your control, and one of which is the place. Yeah, the channels that you want to go in. Of course, we do planogramming, yeah, where we kind of said, okay, this product is to go on this shelf, how many facing, next to which brand, how do you display it, how do you make sure that all the variants are properly displayed. And one of the things, Max, is, innovation typically will take 2 years. And we only lock in, let's say, the mix, like 6 months before the launch, the minimum 6 months, because within that 6 months, you need to do a lot of things. Getting ready the product, getting ready your advertising and promotions, getting all the listing being done. Yeah, it looks like a short time, but within 6 months, anything can happen. And that's why, as a marketeer, doing innovations all the time, we can never be complacent. Yeah, even all your research shows that you have a great product, a great propositions, and everything is kind of, tick, tick, tick in all your research. But the real test is in the execution of your product launch. So obviously we have to keep very close to the market, what is happening in the marketplace, monitoring what competitions are doing, even what retailers are doing. Yeah. So your salesperson, your merchandisers, yeah, who are expected to record down what they see and feedback anything that they see that is kind of, important. So we rely very much on the eyes of our salespeople and merchandiser in store. But we know that deploying people on the ground is very expensive. You want your salespeople to be able to cover as many outlets as possible in the day than to spend time checking. Yeah, same for the merchandisers. Retail audit data you get, but they are at least 1 month late. So is not good enough for you to be able to take quick actions. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the, I think, the frustration part as marketeers, where we spend a lot of money, effort, resource to develop innovations, and then putting them in the marketplace, and not having, enough, I would say, ammunitions, people to monitor and help the product to be successful. Yeah, sometimes I feel like you just put them there and pray for the best, for them to kind of start performing and start moving off the shelves.
If there is one wish that you would like to make the chances of success for NPDs, what would that one wish be?
So Max, we talk about how critical it is to get real insight, real data, quick information so that you can make the adjustment that is necessary. So if we can have something that will allow our, either salespeople or merchandiser to be able to have that information without having to spend too much time in store to capture those information, that will really help. And so we can, access to those information very quickly and be able to intervene in the right time, because time is money. Yeah, as you know, when you list your product on the shelves, your retailers also expect your product to move very quickly. If in 3 months they don't see any movement, out you go. And therefore, you need to make sure that as quickly as possible, you start to see the product moving off the shelves. So no time to waste. So if there's something that can help us in that will be ideal for me.
Can I move the context slightly to a different development in the retail industry, which is the evolution of online shopping compared to the traditional brick and mortar shopping, yeah? Based on your own knowledge of the industry and the retail environments in different geographies, how do you think this will impact, and how will retail execution will it be relevant? And if so, why do you think it'll be relevant?
Yeah, in the recent years, we see that consumers have switched to online shopping. And I think it's going to continue to be a growing trend because it's very convenient. But I think there will be some categories where shopping in a brick and mortar outlets will still be the preferred option. In fact, I remember in China, Alibaba, which started off as a online, e-commerce business, they were affecting a lot of retailers, businesses. So some retailers actually had to close shop because Alibaba came in and moved the consumers from retail shopping in an outlet to online shopping. But, 3 or 4 years ago, Alibaba actually set up their own retail outlets called Hema. Yeah. And we were surprised because why would they want to, kind of reverse the trend to build retail outlets, real outlets? Is because they have done their research and they realize that there is some consumers, there is some product categories where presence in retail outlets are very important. In one of the studies done by Unilever, we know that as much as 70% of purchase decision is actually made in store. As a marketeer, we always invest money in understanding consumer needs and ignore the part, or, we were ignorant of the part that actually shoppers who go through retail outlets are the ones ultimately who make the decisions. These shoppers, when they go and browse around the shelves, they make decisions based on what they see. If there is a promotion on, or there is a new product that captures their attention, or just a outstanding looking product that stare at them, and therefore executions in retail outlets are very important.
Is there any parting thoughts that you would like to leave?
So for me, what is very important is not just about the strategy or the concept. The execution of your new product launches is extremely, extremely important. That is like the moment of truth. Yeah, how your products actually appeals to your consumers, depends a lot on your executions. And we are talking about, let's say, fast-moving consumer goods, packaged goods. The place where they have the highest chance of being seen is actually in a retail outlets. And therefore, investing money in the executions in retail outlets is very critical. So that's where I think, as marketeers, my advice to marketeers is look at where you are going to spend your A&P money wisely.
Thanks, May, for sharing your words of wisdom. That was really insightful, and obviously with a lot of personal insight and knowledge. So thanks for sharing that with our audience. It's been great to have you.
My pleasure.
Max, yeah.
Hi. Thanks, May. I know that you have a prior appointment and you need to leave soon. So I have a few questions that have already come in, and one of them I would like you to respond if you can. This is from Marsha from RB, Reckitt Benckiser. And her question is, how is the path to NPD success different for the e-commerce space? So May, over to you.
Thank you, Max. So, the differences are very much underlined by the unique dynamics of e-commerce. Yeah, one is the availability of data, which should be, used as a rich and accurate source of information to help marketing to put together the mix and adjust the mix speedily. I think the second thing is there's no real limitation of shelf space. And we know in retail, fighting for space is brutal at times. So in e-commerce, you don't have that problem. So this is an opportunity to create the right portfolio to cater to your consumers or your shoppers' needs. But having said that, I would say the third point is that for online retailers, the last minute delivery cost is extremely high. In fact, it's the biggest cost driver in the supply chain. So hence you need to really pay attention to the value density of your offering of your product. So if your product is cheap and bulky, there's no chance that the online retailers would want to carry them. So you need to make sure your product is as of high value as possible and as compact and dense, so that will reduce the shipping or delivery costs. I think another point to bear in mind is that in e-commerce, unlike going to a retail outlet, where you can actually touch and feel and even smell the products before you decide to buy them. In e-commerce, you just cannot do that. So you have to use your creativity. You have to offer a very superior online experience with your offering, with your product, whether it's the color, whether it's the shape, or even, you know, your promotional message to engage with your shoppers. But last and not least, is also an opportunity to do cross-border sales. Yeah, if you get your product listed in Amazon, it can go anywhere in the world. So that is an opportunity. But, you know, therefore you need to remember, is your product really able to travel across the world? Have you got the right packaging? Have you got the right, you know, languages? Have you checked the regulatory to ensure that your products can actually travel? So I think, you know, as a marketeer, developing NPD in the e-commerce space, you really need to bear in mind the dynamics in the e-commerce space. But also something we need to remember, that consumers don't just go to one channel, whether it's just digital or retailers. They move between online and offline. And so as marketeer, we need to make sure whatever mix that we develop, it has to be consistent to our shoppers and consumers. That's all from me. Next.
I understand, May, that you have other commitments, so please feel free to leave whenever you wish to. Now, Ankit, can we go to the next segment, please?
Yeah, sure.
It's my pleasure to have Nirja Sevak as our guest speaker today. For the benefit of those viewers, Nirja is an ex-COO of Suntory Beverage, Food and Health Supplements Division for Asia. And prior to that, she had a stint with Novartis Health in Switzerland. And even prior to that, with Cadbury Schweppes in Southeast Asia and Australia. She has about 30 years of experience in FMCG and pharmaceutical industry, a wealth of experience in several leadership roles. So welcome, Nirja.
Thank you, Max.
So could you frame this in your own words? Why are new launches so important for a company?
Yes, so let me take it back to the starting point. We've got to get real deep consumer insights to understand the needs and the unmet needs. That dictates the strategy of the organization, both in the short term as well as the long term. The next stage is generally the marketing from a strategic point of view outlines a pipeline. And what I've seen within organizations is that the commercial innovation, which has much higher opportunity for success, is not leveraged optimally. So when it comes to NPD, it's not simply brand extensions, new flavors. It is, one has to see the context, one has to be very close to what the external environment is offering as some low-hanging opportunities. It could be a new channel strategy, it could be a new pack strategy. All these things need to be brought into like a wider funnel, and then understand where the highest return on investment for the organization lies, which is where the marketing and sales and operations, if they come together, they will come out in terms of low effort, high returns, opportunities in commercial innovation.
Thanks for leading that insight. So in terms of your experience with the entire process of new product launches, NPDs, what are the elements that can contribute? Obviously, this is a very complex exercise. Yeah, it's not a simple thing that you hit a button and everything works seamlessly. There are many things that happen behind the scenes to make it happen. And also once it's put into motion, there are many things that need to be managed carefully. So in your experience, what are the big challenges around this?
Yes. So as I said, if the consumer insights are deep enough, you know who you are targeting in terms of the consumer segment. We work then within the organization to look at what is that low-hanging fruit. And of course, simultaneously, there's always opportunity to think long-term and start developing products with participation from R&D for a 5-year horizon. The challenges I feel is sometimes the organization is not coordinated enough. So marketing, sales, operations, they are working in silos and they are not bringing brains together to propose and then start to filter ideas to ensure that the highest probability of success in terms of what innovation plan the organization has is achieved. And the second part is we don't bring stakeholders who can be real good participants in this early on. When it comes to retailers, retailers have their own timeline, and that cycle, if we start partnering with them early on, it can improve the success of the launch manifold.
Thanks, Nirja, for that. Now, having laid the background in terms of the challenges that you have seen, how does the retail execution aspect of this entire process, how important is it? And how do you manage this process? Because sometimes the retail execution happens in circumstances which are outside the company's immediate control. So how do you manage this entire process?
Yes. So you can have the best of strategy, you can have a very strong campaign, but if it is not executed well, the returns will not be there. It is very pertinent question, Max. It's execution. And again, going back to early engagement of the sales team, early engagement of the retailers will set you for a path of success. I have seen with my experience that where the sales team and the retailers were engaged early on, the sales team started to believe. And once you have the conviction of the sales team that this launch is going to be successful, you have instantly got a winning battle because they are the front end of the organization. They are getting the shoppers' views firsthand. They are looking at what competitors are doing firsthand. They are always in the trade. They listen to whether it is the wholesalers or it is the partners who are the final retailers. They have very strong value to add. If only we listen and we develop our strategy based on external and internal factors.
Nirja, yeah, thanks for that. Let's say we are already launched the NPD. It's already in the market. It's week 1. And your mainline advertising is supposed to start in 3 weeks, for example. And you need to track, you need to measure, you need to monitor distribution buildup, on-shelf availability, planogram compliance, share of shelf, etc. While all these are set in terms of theory, but how is it happening in the market? And what kind of feedback mechanism did you have? And was it manual? Was it automated of any kind? Was it sufficient in quality, richness of data?
Till very recently, we were doing all this manually. We were having additional feet on the street during the period of launch. So we would hire a set of 100 odd merchandisers, go do a blitz so that they are both helping set the new planograms as well as measure what the expected share of shelf and expected distribution is versus the actual distribution. But if you can imagine that this was all done manually, there were always gaps. And because you, by the time you look at the data, it's too late. You've already missed a couple of weeks of the launch. And the sales team, by the time they realize that X number of stores don't even have the product supplied to them, they have to call the buyer, they have to, coordinate so many things by store that we've lost a lot of valuable time.
Given all the challenges that you mentioned about manual systems, and if you could turn back the clock, what would be one single thing that you would have wished for that you had at your disposal then?
Yes, I think if there was an automated system, and we were exploring some image recognition technologies, that would have been ideal. If there was a way where the merchandiser doesn't have to spend 20, 30 minutes in store, but captured quickly, generally they would go to no more than 15 stores a day. If there was technology at their fingertips, they would be able to do double the number of stores. And that data, if it could seamlessly then be available to the decision makers, whether it's the sales team or marketing team pushing the sales team to get to those optimal numbers, then that whole process could be triggered much faster. Somebody would pick up the phone on day 1 instead of day 15 and get the supplies adequately completed.
In a sense, could I say that if that kind of technology like image recognition was available, it would have increased the chances of success in terms of in-store retail execution, particularly in the context of new product developments where there's a lot of investments riding on it?
Absolutely, absolutely. For both base as well as especially for NPD, I would say it would have been an exceptional tool for making the data enable the right steps for the right stakeholders and achieve better success. Because I can tell you, even though our planograms had been signed off, but when I was personally doing, store visits, I always found our share of shelf wanting because it is like whoever creeps in there and tries to, push the product, it's going to be free for all. Whereas if we have a technology and we get exact numbers, then we can mathematically go back to the key accounts and say that we were promised 60% of the share of shelf. We are actually on an average at 50% or whatever that exact number is, and we are coming to you from a very solid fact base, and we can start moving that needle.
You said it perfectly. Like if you have that exact data, I also feel that it will help you align everyone sort of on the same page internally within the organization as well. So now the marketing team knows what is the execution level, what is the distribution level, sales team knows how they're doing as compared to the targets. And then obviously you have the external factors of then engaging the retailers and telling them that now we have some objective numbers, and then just incorporating that. So I think there's like two benefits. One is obviously the speed. You start to get the data very fast because there's no manual work involved. Everything is automated. And the second is just the accuracy, because what we are analyzing is really the photos, which, as they say, a picture say 1,000 words. So I think both the speed and accuracy combines really, I think, would have given you a far more powerful data point to further improve your chances of new product success. So I totally agree with you on those. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. Shows your practical wisdom and how it can help to improve the success of NPD. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Lovely talking to you.
For that, Nirja. And I know it's quite late down in Australia, but I have one question that's coming from a viewer, Payam from Savola. And the question is, how important is pre-planning before the launch and the steps to take after the launch to ensure your product gains market share and does not get delisted? So Nirja, would you take that, please?
Yes, sure. Thanks for the question. It is important that both aspects are treated very critically and importantly. So planning, going and having a shared vision for internal and external stakeholders is key to success. When we are looking at engaging people, the earlier the engagement, as I shared earlier, it would be improving the probability of success significantly. And when it comes to execution, the excellence in that aspect is absolutely that final stroke. I think May also pointed out very well that shoppers are making the final decision, and that is the moment of truth. 70% of the decision making happens in store. So if the execution, whether it is point of sale or it is the right planogram, the visibility of the new launch, if it's not cracked, we will lose a major opportunity. So all this investment that we have made above the line must translate below the line, and therefore those two things go hand in hand. Proper planning, early engagement, and final execution, and achieving as much excellence in terms of the right KPIs set for the right sales teams and the right channels to make sure that everything works in a 360-degree excellent fashion.
Max?
Nirja, thanks for the answer. And now we'll put Robert online. So Ankit, could you put Robert to the recording?
Yeah, sure.
Robert has over 25 years of experience in consumer products and consumer health industries across APAC, LATAM, and Europe. He held senior management positions in Unilever and Reckitt Benckiser, Mead Johnson. So Robert, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Could you tell us why companies focus a lot on NPDs as a source of growth for their business?
Yes, sure, Max. I think, really for a lot of companies, NPD really is, the lifeblood, going forward. And, whether it's about launching, new products into new segments, or it's really about, refreshing your existing range, keeping it up to date with changing consumer habits, or even, trading consumers up because you offer them more value-added benefits, right? I think if you take, the broader definition of NPDs, it's really what companies are all about, to stay relevant to their consumers, right? And, I think especially in this context, the high pressure situation of MPDs mean that, the retail execution come to the forefront. And whether you execute well or not is more visible and more impactful in those type of situations. And why is that? Normally you get a short time span to prove, the relevance of your product, the number of facings, the amount of shelf space that you're given depends on the rotation and the success of the mix. So it's really critical that, once you come in with this product, you get off to a great start. You understand how you execute, and you really have a good read on whether, in-store plans are being executed the way, you think is critical for the mix to have a real chance with consumers.
Given that it's a complex exercise, as you pointed out, and there are many things happening to make NPD successful, you also mentioned one aspect, which is about retail execution.
Mm.
Can you expand, based on your own experience, a bit more about this and why retail execution is important for the success of NPDs?
Yeah, I think it's actually critical, and I'm sure a lot of people will instantly agree with me. I guess a challenge always around NPDs is ensuring that your launch assumptions and KPIs are met during the launch phase. Again, when the new product has to prove its worth in a relatively short time span. Right now, most NPDs have a clear, business case detailing the sales and the ROI based on executional assumptions and pre-agreed metrics. Therefore, it's critical, I would say, to be able to assess whether these KPIs were met and executed with retailers. Right. Also, on the end of the retailers, there are commitments, there are payments that normally have to be made on both ends, and therefore, it's really, really critical to see whether all of this has happened in each of the stores. If I go back to some personal experience, I do think this in-store execution was especially important. When driving personal care at my time at Unilever, or infant nutrition at RB and Mead Johnson. These are complicated categories with many SKUs, and they really require a well thought out perfect store approach, or a clear shelving pattern that takes the shoppers, for example, for infant nutrition, and guide them. In the case again of RB Mead Johnson, guide the new mom through the entire maternity and post natal experience. So these perfect store plans and shelving plans are critical to the success of the MPDs, and therefore it's also very, very important to make sure that they get properly executed, with messaging, with calls to action, with the right SKUs, sequencing, etc. So, in this case, I would really say that, in-store execution is absolutely vital to the success of these categories, going forward.
In terms of measuring in-store execution, what kind of tools did you have? And were these sufficient? Were these timely? Were these of enough granularity for you to be able to take proper decisions and quick interventions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been working in the industry for a while, as you mentioned. So I've of course, there's a development in this respect. And I guess originally, especially in large markets, with where you would have up to 300, 400,000 stores, and a relatively small sales team, it could be very, very challenging to go and try to keep track of your executional excellence, if you will. Now, originally doing it sort of manually, that sort of evolved. People are using sort of slightly more sophisticated systems. Some companies, some categories, I think, are more advanced than others, but I still think there's a lot of opportunity to improve. and especially once it's less time consuming, it's easy to use for the sales force. It doesn't take too much time, and ideally you have some visual sort of representation of the shelf, so it takes away all the debates and arguments, and make it more factual, fact-based sort of reporting. I think that can really change a lot in terms of the success of the business.
Summarizing what you said, so you believe that something that's simple and easy to use at the point of purchase, point of sale, which will help the salesman or merchandiser execute the plan with some kind of a visual prompt or visual prodding or a visual validation would really be helpful. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. That's absolutely right. And going back a little bit to what we said earlier about, the importance of MPD and having, also quick data availability is critical, because it allows you to respond and to act much more quickly. For example, there's two cases that come to mind. One is around the fact that normally retailers can be somewhat hesitant, at the initial phase of an MPD. They might sort of, order limited quantities and see how it goes. Now, once these initial quantities have been sold and shelves, do not have the product, without timely information around what's happening on the shelf, the chance of success can be hugely impacted. And another sort of example that comes to mind is the fact that it is important to know how far you've come in terms of execution and availability in order to be able to trigger your spending of marketing dollars on a new product. If you start supporting too soon when the product is not there, or too late when you're losing a lot of salability, these are some of other sort of practical operational aspects that make it so relevant for reliable information to be quickly available to respond or act as required.
Now let's move the discussion a little bit wider beyond just pure NPDs. Are there, again, based on your own experience, where you found great retail execution being a tool that enables companies to significantly step change the trajectory of a brand or a product?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I really, cannot overstate the importance of, proper retail execution. And I think in many companies, of course, always people talk about it, but, there's huge levels of difference between, average versus great execution. And many companies, I believe, or operation, do not give it the full focus and attention it deserves. And I personally believe, and I have seen from experience, the difference that great execution can make versus average execution, and that can be really, really material. There's a large number of dollars that can express that you can measure in terms of the impact it has to the business. And becoming a bit more specific, and having some confidence in the time at RB, it gave the company really the confidence to make some acquisitions almost purely on the fact that they knew they would be able to execute better. And, especially in some of the maybe less well-known categories that were sort of high, that had a high margin, but sort of low velocity or low turnover brands like Veet or Dr. Scholl or even Durex. The fortunes of those brands, once the executional excellence came into force, were completely changed. And, brands again like Durex and Dr. Scholl depend hugely on bringing lots of NPD and new news. So you see lots of SKUs coming in, coming out, keeping the range fresh. And that is almost impossible to do if you do not have a good system in terms of implementing and monitoring that. So yes, I can say from experience that it's more than just a nice to have. It can really change the fortune of a company, to be sure.
Yeah. Just one point, I think Max and Robert, that I would like to add basis Robert's experience. So at Parallel Dots, we also did one experiment, one project
so to say, where a brand wanted to launch, juice brands, a company wanted to launch juice brands, and they realized, within 2 weeks, so we were, monitoring the photos every week, and within 2 weeks, those new brands would completely disappear off the shelf. And earlier, because they were relying either on syndicated data or on POS data to understand the sales pattern, and then sort of make a guess whether it's on the shelf or not on the shelf, they were actually missing out on this critical time before they realized that whatever efforts they're putting in, and they really wanted to enter into the juice category, so they didn't have any presence before. And so I think after that entire exercise, it became even more clear that this execution bit will be far more important, so they can have all that research done, decide which category to enter into and which product to build. But without a good execution method and then a good method to track it, I think they realize that they will struggle in terms of getting some real momentum. So yeah.
Would it be right to say that typically NPDs are one shot at success, and if you don't get it right in that first shot, most of the retailers would probably delist it, and then your chance of coming back again and reviving the brand becomes that much more bleak? And that means it points to something that's the entire mix has to come together, including the final execution in the store. So is that something that's also relevant in your opinion?
No, it's absolutely right. I think, as you say, it could be either that the complete, launch is taken off and that space is given to another brand that can execute better or that has a stronger proposition. Or it could also be that in the end, you lose, facings, you lose SKUs and shelf space, and it becomes a minor, sort of less relevant type of product, right? So, yeah, I think, and normally the ROI, the return on that investment takes time, right? Once you start getting your ongoing sales, you recoup some of your initial sales, initial investments that you made up front. And therefore, I think if you do execute poorly or you do lack the visibility to understand whether all the elements came to life on shelf, then you risk of burning through a lot of money up front that unfortunately you will not have a chance to recoup down the line. So yes, I agree with the fact that the one shot or the early shot, you have to really do everything possible to get off to a great start and give it all the chance it deserves.
Robert, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing your personal experiences. It's been great to have you as a speaker on this program, and we'll talk to you soon. Robert, I have one question that's come in, which if you can, please answer. And this question is from Kyra Atekwana from a company called Chicago Booth. The question is, how far are we from the ubiquitous stage of image recognition? Robert?
Sorry, yes, I had to unmute there for a second. Thanks, Max. Well, I think I may not be the absolute expert on this topic, but I know for sure that we are in the midst of all this technology coming to the forefront. I think we're probably only going to see more evolution as we go forward. Personally, what I've seen in some different companies is that the advances come quickly, and the technology, of course, with algorithms, with AI, etc., will give us capabilities that were just not available before. So, from a general point of view, I would argue that yes, I think going forward, this is definitely something that we should adopt as much as possible to benefit of all the great sort of opportunities that nowadays are becoming available.
Thanks for the answer, Robert. And now that we have finished the recorded portion of this presentation, now we are going to come to the live Q&A. We have done bits of it. So I have one more question that came in from Parth Agarwal. And this question is, for Nirja to answer. Are we foreseeing a challenging time for mom and pop stores? Could you take that up, Nirja, please?
Sure. Thanks for the question. You see, my take on this is that mom and pop stores do stand a very good chance. Number one, they are a channel where relationships with customers is really the bedrock. So that gives them longevity, that gives them the right to be, and that also tides over some of the economic ups and downs. Now, the COVID scenario is an example. I feel hypermarkets may get more setback in this environment. Number one, they are closed spaces. People don't want to crowd. Number two, the tourism is down and will stay down for a while. And those are typical stores which get a big advantage from tourism. Whereas mom and pop stores are convenient. They are always close at hand. People in tough times really want to support their local people. And my hunch is that they should be in good stead. What do you think, Max?
Thanks, Nirja. That was really insightful, especially bringing the current context into the picture. So thank you. Just have one thing to add to that, is that I'm based in Thailand, and based on my experience, when modern trade came to Thailand, everybody said GT is dying. But now we are 20 years down the line, and still GT coexists. They have a role to play, and they are happily surviving. And also some of them also have an opportunity to become franchisees of convenience stores like 7-Eleven, which is basically a GT store converted to a modern format where they get the benefits of front end and back end support from 7-Eleven. So it's not going away. Now, can I move on to some more questions? We are getting, by the way, thank you very much, because we are getting a lot of questions. And unfortunately, I have to admit that we won't have time to answer every one of them. But we will certainly get back to the questioners individually with the answers later, but not today, in the interest of time. If I may, Robert, can I ask you one further question? This has come from Bharani Dharan from Cipla Health. And his question is, what are the key success indicators for an NPD launch? What do marketeers have to look for within 90 to 180 days from launch? Robert?
Yes. Again, thank you for that question. I think, KPIs are a really critical element to give proper thought to. And there's many out there. And so therefore, I think it is really important to upfront, think about your strategic objectives for your NPD. What are you trying to achieve? And really align them to some of your core, key performance indicators that you subsequently choose, right? I personally do not like a laundry list as much as a short number of well-chosen KPIs that are, particularly relevant again to the objectives of your NPD. But thinking about KPIs, I think there's possibly 4 buckets that one can consider. One are about market impact metrics, which are obvious ones as overall revenue achievement, market share, etc. There's a second bucket, which is possibly even more interesting, which is around product adoption metrics. So here, you would clearly look at the trial rate for your product, and the rate of increase over time. You'd consider repeat purchasing, user retention. You could look at the units per store. In some cases, for example, like 7-Eleven, you're held to a certain standard of SKUs sold per week per store. Source of volume is another one that is important. Where are you getting your your new users from? Is it affecting your competitors or your own portfolio? And of course, things like in-store availability metrics, making sure that you minimize your out-of-stock levels during the periods, and if possible, in-user experience. So those are around some of the product adoption metrics. I think a third bucket one can think about is are the sort of launch campaign metrics. So here, something to think about is, did we actually support or spend the amount of money that we set out to do? Did we start the number of trials that we wished? Did we do the number of demos in store? But also, how effective was the media support in generating trial? For example, web traffic, page views, click-through rates, and ultimate conversion, of course, and the cost associated with that. And you could also think in this bucket around, the news coverage and word of mouth. So that sort of launch campaign metrics. And then, finally, last but not least, more qualitative metrics. And I think it is especially important to include feedback from your own sales force, as well as your channel partners, to really understand, to get some real insights from the front line, and use that in an iterative process, to continuously work on optimizing the impact of your MPD. So let me stop here, but just to give a few things. But bottom line is, you do have to think through these specifically and try to align them with the strategic objectives that you set, and whether it's your target audience, whether it's a certain channel prioritization that you've made, etc., etc. This is important to give some good thought up front.
Robert, thank you. Thanks for that. Very comprehensive, good answer. Thank you. Now, probably the last question, because we are running out of time. This is from Shankar, and it's something that I would like to ask Ankit to answer. It's about India. And he says that India is a place where organized retailing / modern trade is still in its infancy. Majority of the sales volume is still realized from traditional down market or grocery sales, which does not follow any principle of displays. Within bracket, eye level is buy level. Any software or technological solution for this? Ankit?
Yeah, good question, Sankar. So I'll first give you some context around, why I wanted to answer this question. So currently, more than 60% of the photos that we process at Parallel Dots belongs to traditional trade. And we have been doing that for the last 2 years. So one is, we realize that there is a solution to crack, the traditional trade. Though I agree with your observation that it's slightly more chaotic, it's obviously not that organized. What we have figured out is that the basic core technology still has to be the same. It has to identify a photo and figure out what that photo says, what that photo means, and how can we convert that into a data. But I believe that when we talk about traditional trade, it has to be a collaborative effort between the solution provider and the consumer good company. So the company has to first invest and figure out what really they want to understand in terms of execution. We have seen some of the leading companies actually first making sure that they have a merchandising plan in place, even for traditional trade stores. They have some incentive plans for retailers to provide them some space. Then they have a very good plan, like a perfect store execution criteria, even for traditional trade. And then the image recognition bit comes in later, where they want to really make sure that those plans are being adhered to. So for us, if we really know what is the plan, if we really know what exactly ideal image looks like, even in a traditional trade stores, because ultimately it's about space planning. Ultimately, it's about giving that proper space and putting it up, giving it a proper display, so that consumers can really feel that they are pushed to buy your product. So if you know the plan, if you know the protocols, it's much easier for us to customize our solution, customize a technology solution to understand the different KPIs. So I believe the solution is there. It just won't work out of the box. It has to be a collaborative effort between both, the solution provider as well as the company who's looking to benefit. Yeah.
Ankit, thanks for that. And we are about, I think, 5 minutes over time already. And I know that Nirja, it's past or coming close to midnight for her. So I would like to thank Nirja and Robert for your presence and for answering the questions. And we'll end up in a few minutes with Ankit doing the final roundup.
Yeah, thanks, Max. And yeah, again, thanks, Nija. Thanks, Robert, for giving your time. And thanks everyone who attended the webinar. What I wanted to do is just take another couple of minutes to quickly introduce the solution. I know we've got some questions on the solution itself, and I know how we discussed about the challenges of execution, and also how the POS data or the supply chain may not be for you to understand your execution. So I wanted to touch briefly upon how an image recognition provider like Parallel Dots can improve your NPD execution. So really going into the fact in terms of how it actually works. So typically, ultimately, it's image recognition, it's photo recognition. So someone has to click a photo. In most cases, it will be either a sales rep who is tasked with store auditing. So he will click a photo through his handheld device. It could be a merchandiser, or it could be a third-party auditor. But the difference here is that earlier, if they have to do it manually, they have to look at each facing, they have to enter that data, they have to count each facings. And you can imagine, in any typical category, which is a fast-moving category, you will have 200 plus SKUs. It was a time-taking, laborious job, and it may lead to accuracy concerns when human and sort of manual tasks are involved. What an image recognition solution really does is automate all that counting. So your reps have to just take a photo. Internet connection is becoming more and more ubiquitous in today's world. So those photos are uploaded to a cloud server, and then they analyze and create what we call an actionable insight. So if there's any problem, the guy in the store can actually just fix it while he's still there. And at the same time, we have digitized the shelf, so we have all the data. So the management team can glean through that data and figure out how the products are performing. If they're NPDs, what is the coverage of their NPDs? So all that information then becomes readily available. Now, in the context of new product launches, how image recognition really shines. So one thing that I wanted to share is most of the image recognition or artificial intelligence solution need data. They need a lot of data, in fact, to perform well and to perform reliably. But how do you get that much data when you're launching a new product? That product has never been on the shelf, so there's no real world data to train your AI for. And it's cases like these where, at Parallel Dots, we've created a solution where you see this Doritos pack shot and assume that this is a new spicy nacho flavor that is being launched. We can train the AI just with this one single pack shot, and we don't need a real world store data or a shelf data. And that gives us two benefits. One, because of the time sensitive nature of NPD, the training process is really fast. So we are ready with a trained AI solution even before your products start appearing on shelf. So as soon as the photo comes, we can identify your NPD. And I think that really provides value when you have to look at the distribution of your NPDs. And this is channel independent. So your traditional trade stores, your C stores, modern trades, hypermarket, supermarket, everywhere it works. The second is really the real-time part of it. So as soon as you have your planogram resets when you will do your new launch. And as soon as we identify any anomaly in the planogram, when we compare it to a reference that's already there in our system, we can flag and we can alert that to the field guy, to the field rep. And he can, depending upon, what is the agreement with the retailer, he can take an action or he can discuss with the store staff and really try to get the visibility improving. And that's where the whole value comes for this type of solution. And the third and the most important thing, I think the second value which any company would get by deploying image recognition is you're freeing up all that time of your field reps from doing all these manual intensive work. And so they can cover more stores or they can do more value added work, like discuss for additional space with retail owners or build relationship with the key accounts, which is very important. So So really, if you combine all these benefits, these new technologies, and especially the way we are doing with parallel dots, it really helps you get that instant insight and make sure that at least from the execution point of view, your NPDs don't fail and there's no confusion within the organization whether the products are actually being visible on the shelf. I'll conclude with that. As Max mentioned, if there's any more question, feel free to visit our website, send us your query. You'll find a help section, a little bit about our team at Parallel Dots. And if there's any, question or you want to know more about Parallel Dots, just visit our website, www.paralleldots.com. With this, I want to wrap up. So have a nice day, and just stay safe. We know we're going through one of the most unusual times in history. So I really hope everyone stays safe, everyone stays at home. And thanks again for the speakers, for the attendees. Thanks, Max, for taking the time. And have a great day.
Pleasure. Thanks, Robert.
All right.
And all the people who checked in. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.